Hello, everybody. I am George Williams. I am the Next Search Catalog Coordinator for Northeast Kansas Library System. And this is video number one in a series of videos that koha-US is going to try to start doing. We're going to try to shoot for every other Thursday, and we're going to try and do deeper dives than other training videos do and get into some how-to stuff with jQuery and SQL and things that you can do to modify your koha system to make it do things that you didn't think it could do. And with me is Christopher Brannon. So
I'm George's sidekick this week, Christopher Brannon from the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's great to be back in our normal digs after being on the road with the conference. And I am Christopher Brannon with the Coeur d'Alene Public Library and the Cooperative Information Network.
And I'm George Williams. I'm the Next Search Catalog Coordinator at Northeast Kansas Library System. I was just noticing I just unblurred my background because you've got books behind you, and I'm at home today, so I've got books behind me, mostly my wife's cookbooks, and a few of my books are back there too. But
yeah, at least your background's real.
Yeah.
If you saw my real shelves, it's just full of equipment. So
I figured you were in the bathroom at the Coeur d'Alene Library or something. So
yes, because that's where I do all of my important work.
Yeah, same here.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit about report writing, particularly with a topic that I was trying to problem solve. Surprisingly, we didn't have a report on it, and just trying to figure out a good way to approach this. So George and I had talked a bit and decided we'd share this information. But before we get into all of that, wanted to talk briefly about the conference that we had just held in Round Rock, Texas. It was a great conference. Really enjoyed it. I felt like we had a good, solid core of presentations. And one of the difficulties that we have with conferences, especially this day and age, ever since we started doing hybrid conferences, it's made it a little bit more challenging for us because we have to balance things between what's going on live in the room and what's going on online. We want to be able to include folks that are attending online, but one of our highest priorities is, the people that paid to be at the conference in person. We have to make sure everything is kosher there, and so that's our top priority. Unfortunately, we can't make both things top priority, but that is our top priority: is making sure everything's flowing well for the people in person. The hybrid, unfortunately, it does get a little bit of a backseat to things, especially when we're doing some of our things that are specifically for the in-person parts. We've had some comments from the evaluations that people wanted to be included in like our rotational meetings that we did for SIGs. It was the speed dating. And while we want to be able to include as much as we can for everybody online, something like that is just not feasible. And so it's not practical for us to be able to include absolutely everything that we do in person with the folks that are online. The presentations are, the most important. And so that's what we're trying to provide. But the second comment that we had that was even more predominant from the evaluations was Audio quality is always a concern. We, of course, have ironed out a lot with, what we're doing in the room, and we've improved things so that we have microphones for people that are out in the crowd so that they can be included in and be heard by everybody in the room, and hopefully the people watching online. But this was just one of the situations where our setup was not ideal. When we get there, we kind of have to scramble to figure out what we have to work with. I mean, they tell us, they can only tell us so much, and it's hard to know how things are going to work out until we get there and put everything together. And
it's not every, the best sound I think we ever had was the conference in Lawrence, and part of the reason we had such good sound there is because Jason and I were able to go over to the venue a month before the conference, and Jason was able to figure out exactly what he wanted to do to get the sound to work right. And we don't necessarily have that kind of access to the venue before,
or luxury. Yeah. So yeah, and ideally we want to be able to tie in the sound system to the presentation computer so that everything can be picked up well, and you're not having a microphone picking up the sound from the broadcast in the room, because that's what we ended up with. And we get a lot of that echoey sound, and it makes it more difficult to understand what's being said sometimes. So
What?
it is a challenge.
I'm not sure I understood that last part.
Are you being serious?
No, of course
Okay.
not.
Sometimes I just want to reach through and never mind. So yeah, it does present some challenges. We try to do the best we can with what we have at the venue, and sometimes it's better than others, and sometimes not. We had a really good camera, which was really nice. The venue provided a camera that we could control, and we were able to get a lot of good shots of the people talking in the audience. But again, we were relying on a microphone fixed in the room that was trying to pick up everything that was said, because we couldn't tie into the sound system. So we are working on that. We just wanted to mention that, your comments are important, and we are listening, and we are seeing what we can do to improve that for future conferences. So
I'm thinking back to the first conference we did where we had, if we recorded everything, and that was, I think, the Coeur d'Alene conference. And so in some of those, like I know one of my presentations from the Coeur d'Alene conference, you can hear my voice the whole time, but then for most of the presentation, you just see a black screen.
yeah,
So now we've gone the other direction where you can see us, but you can't hear what we're saying.
we were figuring it out as we went, and surprisingly, especially for a 2-track conference, we were trying some new things then and there, and surprisingly, even with that hiccup, it went better than we expected. Especially, we're trying to do online, and we're trying to do 2 tracks, and we were trying to have a presenter. Our keynote was actually remote from New Zealand, and so all of those factors, there's going to be hiccups. So we do what we can, and it's a mixed bag. And now that we have some consistency built into my position with koha-US, we'll have a little bit more consistency in building off of those techniques and technologies as we go. So anyways, so today's topic, I was presented with a request for a report, and it sounds like a very easy report, but there are some technical hurdles to get through in order to present that data. We're having some career changes and we're looking at our transfers. You know, how much is each library sending out, and how much is each library receiving with transfers. This way we can get some good numbers for a courier and reshape things the way that we need to accordingly. But and we have a very good table for that. We have a branch transfer table that we can look at. But the challenge for me was, okay, I want to, list all of the libraries, and I want to be able to count within a date range. I want to count the instances going to that library and the number of instances in another column that are coming from that library. And doing separate counts can be tricky within a SQL report unless you know how to do it right. And
I know how to do it right.
I was on the right track, but I checked the SQL library. I didn't see much on transfers in there.
Yeah, that's my fault.
But I did happen to ask George if he had anything, and lo and behold, he does, and it does exactly what I need. So
kind of almost exactly what you need. Yes. So I have had this report for quite a while. And the reason Christopher couldn't find this report on the wiki is because I hadn't put it there. But shortly after this, after we record this, I will put this report on the SQL reports library in the Koha wiki. But let me show you what I got going on. So I'm going to reports, saved reports. And this reports table takes a second or two to load because I got too many reports. And fortunately, I had the good sense to copy the title so that I can just stick it in here. So this is a report. This is part of a package of reports that I run at the beginning of each month. And so let me just run it and show you what the results are. And then we can talk about how we get to these results. So what I'm counting here in the column that says NX, loaned, LM. So these are next search catalog, ILLs loaned last month. And this is, these are within the consortium. So this would be like if my Leavenworth library shipped something to Ottawa library to fill a request. That's what this is counting. That's what this first column is counting, is how many things did Leavenworth ship to other libraries in the previous calendar month. And you had a question?
Just to be clear, your ILL isn't an ILL. It is within the
consortium.
Okay.
Yeah. This is what it was called before I moved to Kansas. This is what this they were counting this in a different way with a different report, and I just smashed the two reports together essentially and cleaned them up a little bit so that there were some weird issues. But then the other column in here is ILL borrowed last month. This counts the things that arrived at your library in the previous calendar month that were shipped to your library to fill a request. So this is almost doing what Christopher wants. What it's not counting are things where we're shipping something after it's been checked out and returned. It's not counting the transfer back to its home. That's what isn't getting count that you might want to add in there. But it's got the basics. So like during, and I've got the dates set up for this so that it runs. Anytime I run it in September, it's going to give me the numbers for August. Anytime I run it in October, it's going to give me the numbers for September. And I'll explain how that works too. But, during the month of August, the Linwood Library shipped 423 items to other libraries to fill requests. And they received 126 items to fill requests for their patrons. And that's what we're counting here. So let me actually show you the SQL code. And so the way that I'm doing this, the way that I'm getting both of these numbers in one row is I'm doing it with subqueries. So this ILL loaned count is coming from this subquery here. And the ILL borrowed count is coming from this subquery here. And I'm left joining those to the branch names, because that way, if I have a situation like our digital content library, it doesn't ship or receive anything because it's not a physical location. So it always has zeros there. But what I do with this is I turn it into a spreadsheet. And we save those spreadsheets in our statistics. And so if I download the spreadsheet, it's going to have that data as part of that package in our monthly overview report. But this way, every library has its own line. And so even if it's zero, it makes building the spreadsheets a lot easier if I don't have to account for situations where where there's a library that doesn't show up because there wasn't any traffic that month.
Yeah.
So what this first part is saying is it's saying branch name is saying, get me a list of all the branches by name. And then I'm going to get all of the loans, all of the things we loaned. So let's look at that a little bit. It's I've got items home branch, count every row from branch transfers, where the items home branch is not the same as the to branch. So right there, I'm saying if the items home branch is different, we're going to count those. And the way that I get the previous calendar month is I'm saying, so the dates that we're using to get the items loaned is the date sent. So I want to know in a given month how many things were sent. And the way that I get that to a specific year is you do year date sent. But then I'm saying when that equals the year now minus 1 month. So the reason you have to do that is because in January, you don't want the current year, you want the previous year. And the way to get the month it was the year it was last month is to do this year. The year from now minus 1 month is essentially what that's saying.
Okay.
And then I'm doing the same thing with the month. I want to know what's the month, what number month was it in the previous month? And just instead of saying year now minus 1 month, I'm saying month now minus 1 month. And then we've got, I'm saying branch transfers when the branch transfer to month is different from the branch transfer from branch. So I don't think it's as common anymore in Koha. There used to be a lot of circumstances where you would get these weird errors when you were doing transfers, where you would end up with some things where the to branch and the from branch would be the same. I don't remember all of the different circumstances where that would come up, but that's been cleaned up a lot in Koha, and it doesn't happen as often anymore. But that's just in there to solve that problem when it was a bigger problem. I honestly, yeah.
So the line previous to the dates, I take it that's where you're excluding things that are coming back home.
Yeah, this is saying, so in order to know who owns the item, you have to link this all out. You have to link the branch transfers table back to the items table, because the branch transfers table doesn't know the items home branch.
Okay.
And so I'm only want to count the things, like if we were talking about like the Leavenworth library, I only want to count the things that Leavenworth is shipping that it owns. Because in this report, I only want to know what this library loaned to other libraries. So if Leavenworth had shipped something, if something had been shipped from Leavenworth, like if if a patron at the Leavenworth Library had borrowed a book from Lansing, and then that book had been returned at Leavenworth, and it was then shipped off to Sabetha to fill a request in Sabetha, I don't want to count that because that item wasn't owned by Leavenworth. I'm only counting the things that Leavenworth owns that are being shipped to other places.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what that first line does, is it's saying, just show me the things that are owned by this library that are being shipped to other libraries. And then in the previous calendar month, and then I don't want to count these weird errors that I don't know what the frequency of those anymore. There used to be more of them. And there is, in the branch transfers table, there's a column called comments. And you see messages in the comments like wrong transfer. It seems like there are a couple of other things that show up in the comments. So if Leavenworth ships something to Ottawa and the item gets checked in Rossville, that will put a comment in the comment field that says wrong transfer. And so I didn't want to count those. And then finally, I want the branch transfer reason reserved. I want these to be things that were shipped because they had a hold on them.
So your focus on this report is more towards what's actually being loaned of yours and what you're borrowing of others, rather than what's actually moving, which is what I'm trying to.
Yeah, but this should give you a good this should give you a good starting place, probably. But the thing that makes this all work is I'm doing this as a subquery, and I'm calling this whole subquery ILL loaned. So what we're doing up here is we're saying these are all the things I'm counting that are, I'm getting this number from ILL loaned. And then on the flip side of that, I've got almost the exact same query, and I'm calling it ILL borrowed. The big difference here is I want the branch transfers to branch and the items home branch. I only want to count the things where those two things are different. So if this is an item that's owned by Leavenworth being shipped back to Leavenworth, even if it's to fill a hold, I don't want to count that because that's not what this query is trying to, that's not the question this query is trying to answer.
Right.
And then the other flip side of this is that instead of counting date sent, I'm counting date arrived. So in this first part, I want to count the things that are being shipped based on the date that they're shipped. And for the things that are being borrowed from other libraries, I want to count the date that it arrives at its destination rather than the date that it's shipped to its destination. So those are the big differences there. But then this is the result I get. And this is a query that we've been using for as long as I've been at Nichols. When I started here, this was two separate queries. There was a report that was run to get the things shipped and a separate report that was run to get the things being received. And they had date ranges in it. You had to go in and manually enter the dates. And I didn't like doing that because I just wanted to be able to click on the run the report and have all the data there. And I wanted it to come back as one result. But the way that I use this and the way that we store it is if I open up one of these reports, this data is being put into my Excel spreadsheet. So if we go back to August, which I just did the data for August recently, here's where that data goes into my big master spreadsheet for the whole year. So this is, the Bonner Springs Library. During the month of August 2024, they shipped 1,200 items and they received 848 items just to fill requests at their library. And the way that I've got this spreadsheet set up is if I go back to Bonner Springs and I look over the whole year, this adds up every month. So we've got, so far this year, Bonner Springs has shipped 8,636 items and they've received 6,120. But that's the way that I use this report, is I use it to fill in these two columns here. And that's why I want every row, whether the branch has any, I've got this library in Wetmore, is the Wetmore Academic School, Academic Center closed a year ago, and I haven't taken them out of the system yet because there was still some data at the beginning of the year. So I need to leave them in there for a little while longer. But if I didn't have them, if I wasn't doing left joins in that, these are left joining these two subqueries, then I wouldn't have a row at all for Wetmore Academic Center. And then I would have to go in and futz around with putting the right rows into the right places in my spreadsheet. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing, and you saved me a load of time by sharing this information. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can pull off to account for actual physical things being moved around.
And I think I do a lot of subqueries. So and one of the things I like about them, it's really easy to write a report that says these are all of the things that we own by this collection code, but usually those reports, when you see them written, they just have the code there. But if you use a subquery, it's really easy using a subquery to say, to get the data out of the authorized values table, to actually put the collection code name into the report, which I think is a lot easier for most of our staff, because they don't know what NVID if you're new. We've gone to all the trouble to give these authorized values names and descriptions. They've got a name in the staff client and possibly a different name in the OPAC. And then we just use the data that we get in most of our reports, just has the code. So
Right.
Why not go that extra step and throw a subquery in there that says, go grab the names of those from those collection codes, and throw those in there so that it's easier for people to recognize, what it is that's going on there. So that's one of the things that I do. That's probably the thing I do the most with subqueries, is grabbing collection codes and shelving locations and putting those actual descriptors in the report data rather than just the code.
Excellent. No, I like being able to steer away from codes in our report results, or even in our drop downs, in parameters when you're checking things.
Yeah.
I try to steer away from those codes as much as possible, because I want things in plain English for our staff, so they don't have to go and look things up and decipher what does this mean. So
yeah, and there can be some pretty weird codes, because I think there's a 10-digit limit on like the codes in the authorized values table. So putting them into plain English makes sense to me. So
yeah. All right, George, thank you very much for sharing that. And it's been an interesting transition back from the conference back into the normal everyday practices of the library, and getting back into my routines. And so my head isn't fully there yet. And so you saved me a lot of work by sharing. So
that's my pleasure. So.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody again in 2 weeks. So please come back.
We'll see.